K is for killer, and K is for knight. One seems quite noble, the other a blight. But two once were married, and it is not flattery to say that the killer was Elizabeth Bathory. I'm Indy Neidell, and this is the World Dictionary, today featuring Elizabeth Bathory. Countess Elizabeth Bathory was a Hungarian noblewoman. She was also a serial killer, and the Guinness Book of World Records labeled her the most prolific female killer of them all. So she was likely a dick. We know that from the beginning of the episode, but we're still going to tell her story anyhow. She was born in 1560 or 61 in Hungary, which was then part of the Habsburg monarchy's lands, though outside the Holy Roman Empire. She was pretty royally connected on both sides of her family, and her uncle would be King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania, which wasn't a surprise since those two were a commonwealth back then. He also became Prince of Transylvania, which was a real thing, not just a horror movie thing. Young Elizabeth was a pretty smart cookie, learning Latin, Greek, and German, while much of the local nobility remained illiterate. But she did have fits of extreme rage as a girl, and there were a few crazies among her relatives. This was no doubt because of many years of inbreeding. Various sources have her learning about Satanism and sadomasochism from an uncle and an aunt, though it's hard to know exactly what's true. She was engaged to Ferenc Nadasdy at the tender age of 11. He was 5 years older. But she had a child out of wedlock with a commoner at 13 or 14. She married Ferenc at the age of 15, and his gift to her was his castle. He, by the way, would become known as the Black Knight of Hungary, and also known for his cruelty to enemy prisoners. He would have them publicly impaled. If you don't know what that involves, then look it up. But it's what Vlad the Impaler, Count Dracula, and Ferenc's predecessor, was named for. Ferenc spent years and years away at war with the Ottomans, and Elizabeth maintained and defended their lands, which lay on the road to Vienna. This she did just fine, and there are recorded instances of her helping poor women as well. Now, he died in 1604, but already by then, terrible stories about Elizabeth were spreading, and after that, they went into overdrive. See, in her letters to him, Elizabeth had for years asked her husband about torture methods he used on his prisoners, and she tried them out at home. Eventually, he would mail her suggestions for torture to try at home. Things progressed from beatings and red-hot pokers to the truly awful, pouring honey on people and tying them up in the forest so wild animals or insects would eat them, biting the flesh off their faces, sewing them inside dead horses, burnings, freezings, starvings, and possibly, though not definitely, cannibalism. But who were these victims? You'd think that the hundreds, yes, the highest number of victims claimed at trial was 650, but it's likely a bit of an exaggeration. You'd think that this wouldn't go on for so long, right? I mean, 30 years. Well, she was high nobility, and her family was the head of the local government, and this was Hungary in the 1500s. Her first victims were young peasant girls who had responded to offers of well-paid work at the castle. She also had a woman's quarters that offered instruction in courtly etiquette, and eventually local gentry, though much lower on the totem pole than Elizabeth, sent their daughters to her. Many never returned home, and some people were simply abducted. Lutheran minister Istvan Magyari publicly complained about her in the first few years of the 1600s, and even told the court at Vienna, but it wasn't until 1610 that anyone was assigned to investigate her alleged diabolical deeds. The Palatine of Hungary, the king's representative, sent two notaries who collected testimony from over 300 witnesses, a mix of commoners, nobility, and clergy. The witnesses reported all the stuff I said before and more. Some of them had relatives who'd died in the etiquette school. Some had seen dead bodies with evidence of torture on them. Two of them had actually witnessed the Countess torture and kill young servant girls. On December 30th, 1610, the Palatine, Georgi Turzo, went to the castle and caught Elizabeth Bathory in the act. They found one girl dead, another one dying, one wounded, and others locked up. Except not. The only evidence we have for that is Thurzo's declaration to the locals, but apparently Bathory and 4 of her servants were arrested before the victims were discovered. Not that it makes much difference, since they were discovered and everybody knew what was going on. The servants were arrested as accomplices. So she was tried for her crimes for all the world to see. No, of course she wasn't. A trial and execution of high nobility would be a public scandal, and the family would be disgraced, and they, ruled Transylvania. Not to mention that her family property would have been seized. So Thurzo thought they could maybe stick her in a nunnery, but by now, the tales of her torturing and killing not just peasant girls, who were meaningless, and actually doing it to lesser nobility had spread, and the nunnery thing wasn't going to work. She was instead kept under strict house arrest. The 4 accomplices were tried though, you bet. One source says they were tortured for information and then buried alive, which, could have happened, I guess. They were executed. Either way, the endless stream of witnesses gave numbers of from dozens up to many hundreds of victims of Elizabethan torture. You see? Okay. Though the official count ended up at 80. Countess Elizabeth Bathory was bricked up in a set of rooms in the castle that only had small slits for ventilation and food. She remained there for 4 years until her death, August 21st, 1614. What she is actually most famous for, though, is bathing in the blood of her victims. This is the basis for the modern vampire bloodbath thing. And though Count Dracula is the main source of vampire fiction, the Transylvania Countess, who stays forever young by bathing in the blood of her victims, is a pretty big one too. Thing is, she didn't do it. Well, I mean, she might have, but no one, not one single person out of all of the hundreds of witnesses, nor her accomplices, mentioned it at the trial. In fact, no one mentioned it until 1729, 115 years after her death, when the first account of her case appeared in print. And in 1817, when the witness accounts were published for the first time, they, as I said, had no mention of bloodbaths. There is also the possibility that the whole thing, the whole story I've just told you, was all a big conspiracy. There are authors who argue that the case against her was politically motivated, what with her extensive wealth and land ownership, or religiously motivated since the Catholic Habsburgs had it in for the Protestant rulers of Transylvania. And it is true that at that time there were a lot of religious and political machinations in Hungary concerned with the spread of Protestantism and furthering Habsburg control of Hungary. But the conspiracy theory has some holes. Remember, the guy who initiated the investigation was a Lutheran, i.e. Protestant minister. And anyhow, to refute the case, you'd have to refute the testimony of literally hundreds of people, as well as the physical evidence, which was dead bodies and actual dying girls discovered in Bathory's castle. So I don't think she gets out of this one, But was she a dick? To the scale. Her achievements. She did protect her land from the Ottomans, this is true. She was known to help the destitute, those are good things. In fact, in terms of life achievements, she doesn't really have any negative ones, but she killed many, many people. Possibly many hundreds of them, and though I suppose you could kill someone without being a dick about it, like defending your family from harm maybe, or executing a spy or traitor in wartime, once you do things like removing people's flesh, starving or freezing them, or pretty much any kind of needless torture, you have most definitely entered the realm of dickishness because it involves putting your own pleasure at the expense of others. So she is a first-class dick, but hey, at least we got a great band like Bathory. That's it for today. If you know of any dicks throughout history that we should talk about, let us know who they are in the comments and tell us why. And please remember, living people do not count. And please support us on Patreon so I can continue taking the time to write and film all of this awesomeness. There is a link below. Do not forget to subscribe to never miss a single letter of the alphabet. And hey, don't be a dick. Oh, and check this out as well. This is the Bathory YouTube pronunciation video. You could totally put some beats to this and make like a little ending tune or something if you want to, yeah?
We should do that.
Because it just goes like, it goes, Bathory, 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 Bathory.